on this journey of self-recovery. Because when I started 15 years ago, there was nothing to really acknowledge or talk about dealing with complex post-traumatic stress.
Let's talk a little bit about trauma, because people don't understand what our brain is designed to keep us safe, right? So it does a great job of hiding these memories, and even though they're not dealt with, they're kind of underneath the surface, percolating there, and they're still causing effects.
The single greatest impact of anything so far has been the BrainTap device. It really is the culmination with what you've pulled together with the BrainTap. It's addressing self-talk. It's changing the vocabulary within. It's coming to an understanding that thoughts are things, that my mind is a fertile, active space that is either positive or negative based upon the input that I give it.
Welcome to the Brain Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Patrick Porter. Please join us on our mission to better a billion brains. Enjoy the episode and remember to share it with your family and friends.
Hey, you all, how you doing? I have got the pleasure of being with Dr. Patrick Porter, the BrainTap inventor. You know that device I've been raving about? It's phenomenal. And of course, deal with it. And my lovely wife, Melissa. And
Hi, everyone.
We're here for the BrainTap podcast.
Yeah, we're here, and I want to welcome you to this kind of impromptu BrainTap podcast. We decided to convert our conference room into a podcast studio here so we could get the two of you here because your story is so unique. And I think BrainTap users need to know about it. When we were talking, we've known each other now, it seems like forever, but it's only been a few short months. And we've been talking, I read your book, and I thought, BrainTap Nation needs to know about this. Not only to know about it, because I was shocked at what's going on out there, but also what we can do about it. Because a lot of people are talking about the problem, but we have a solution. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and how BrainTap might be able to help people get out of their sympathetic drive, if you will. If you're not familiar with sympathetic and parasympathetic, sympathetic is your fight or flight. And when you have a traumatic event, sometimes it's like pushing the gas pedal down and you don't know where the brake is anymore. And you're just going 100 miles an hour. And we need to disengage that for healing to happen. So Dr. John King, I want to welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
And Melissa, thanks for being here. We need to have creative teams working together now more than ever. It seems like there's a lot of things going out there in the world that are splitting people up and causing them to grow apart. I know when I met my wife, who I work with, I've been working with her for 35 years. Somebody said, "How can you work together?" We go, "We couldn't imagine not working together."
Yeah, it's exactly the same.
It's like we find that even though we work together, we don't spend enough time together.
Yes, that's true.
We're the same.
So that's awesome. So tell me a little bit about when I read this book, it blew my mind. What happened to you as a youngster? So I know some of your audience might already know that, but the BrainTap audience doesn't know who you are. We're putting together a program, Journey to Peace. But we're basing it on your life, your mission, what you're doing, and I think it folds perfectly into BrainTap because we need to help people with their brain function and trauma. But tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Well, thanks, mate. So I was sexually abused from the ages of 4 to probably 16, 4 to 14. I was a little bit big by 16 for people to get away with it. And, some of the terms that people use today was trafficked. The lady who raised me, she introduced me to her friends, and there's a whole range of things. You read about that in the book. And really the journey that's got me here is when I had recall of the events when I was 45. And so for the last, however long that is now, 15 years, I've been on this journey of self-recovery. Because when I started 15 years ago, there was nothing to really acknowledge or talk about men who had been trafficked or sexually abused. Particularly with perpetrators that were female. And, along the way you find out that 45% of trafficking perpetrators are female and over 50% of victims are actually male. If you're looking at, and, especially if you start to look globally, the numbers get very high because of war, construction and a range of things. So I've been on this journey and, and I know we'll get to it. One of the single greatest impact of anything so far has been the BrainTap device, in terms of dealing with complex post-traumatic stress and the impact of trauma.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about trauma because people don't understand what our brain is designed to keep us safe, right? So it does a great job of hiding these memories, and even though they're not dealt with, they're kind of underneath the surface, percolating there, and they're still causing effects in the life. So what have you found happens when somebody's, like you said, you just started remembering these things at 45?
Yeah.
So for whatever 30 years, these were in the back of your mind, playing out scenarios subconsciously that you didn't know about. So what happened that prompted you to actually start remembering?
It was a Thursday afternoon, and it was daffodils. Believe it or not, spring had come on, and as I was growing up, there was one place that I'd walk by on the way to school, and daffodils would come up every spring. And for me, daffodils became a symbol of hope, because every spring that I saw daffodils, I thought I've made it one more year. And there was this one particular beautiful morning. It was, fairy tale clouds and beautiful blue skies. And I remember still vividly, I stepped over this bed of daffodils I planted, and I said, what an incredible bunch of daffodils. And at that moment, whatever happened, and the brain said, it's time to deal with this. And it just flooded. And everything came back. Up to that point, my life was like little 8mm squares of films that would occasionally play. But this time it all strung together, and and it was a movie that ran continuously for 3 years. Daymares, I'd walk around, I'd be conscious, and I'd be continually replaying the orgies and the sex and the pornography I was exposed to. I'd be sitting, I remember I was preaching at church once, and here I am preaching at a church, and this movie is just playing of all these things that had happened in my life. And as you said, the brain was just decided that was when I was going to have to deal with this. And it often happens with men over the age from 35 onwards, particularly between 35 and 45. That seems to be whatever behavior has suppressed this thing for so long. That's when the body says we need to deal with this stuff now.
Right. Well, they say that in neuroscience that if we can get one new thought in, the brain has to totally rewire. So that means it has to go in. So if we have that one thought that triggers it. They say thoughts are also like beads on a string. So we pull one string, we don't know what it's going to pull way back in our history. So something happened, the daffodils were the trigger that unlocked. And I tell people sometimes, I said it's almost like when I was losing my hair, now it's all gone. But when I was losing it, I'd go to take a bath, and then I'd see it in the shower, right? And you'd have to clean it out. Well, a lot of times, once you clear that out, the drain, now you start to understand what's going on. And not that we can fix the past, right? We can't change the past. But what we want to do is teach people that you can reframe the past.
Yeah.
One thing is that there's a saying that the person who's angry drinks the poison, not the person you're angry at. Because
that's very good.
That anger actually, we know physiologically, creates a chemical corresponding reaction in our own body.
Yeah.
So when Buddha said, he who angers you conquers you, you literally, in medical science is actually proving this. When you have a negative thought or you have run negative scenes in your mind, your body literally recreates the physical corresponding creation, which destroys you. So when Jesus said, hey, love your enemy, basically it's more like love yourself. When you're sending that loving energy to your enemy, you're actually getting it yourself.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your journey. What happened before BrainTap? I mean, obviously you've been working on this for some time.
Yeah.
So you started to work on it. It started to percolate up. And how did people respond to that? Because we don't hear about. I've never heard about it since before you talked. And I'm in this field.
Yeah.
And I work with PTSD and things like that. And usually when I'm working with trafficked victims, they always seem to be female.
Yeah, sure.
So tell me, how did they react? How did people react when you came out and started telling people?
I was going to say they didn't react well, but that was my perception. I think they reacted within the framework of the narrative they had. I remember trying to find a support group for men, and there was nothing for men that had been sexually abused. I remember ringing rape helplines, and there was no one who wanted to talk to me. I remember going, it wasn't one of my finest days, but I remember telling a receptionist at a church to go, fire truck off, because she told me I was a predator wanting to come to this support group and just prey on all these vulnerable women. I think that's one of the whole there's enough stigma around this for anybody, but particularly as a man, there's this sense of shame beyond it. Where they've got an environment which says you should enjoy having sex with everyone at all times if you're male. And I remember people saying to me once I started to discuss it, "Wow, you're so lucky to have had sex back then," and the fact that it was with the woman who raised me and her friends didn't seem to compute to people. And there's all that shame associated with that, and then there's no place to discuss it. So it was very challenging, and I really had to just do it myself. I realized that if I didn't find a way to process this information, I was dead in the water. At that stage, my mental health diagnosis was borderline personality disorder, which has an average lifespan of 41 years because of risky behavior. I was at 47 when I got that diagnosis. So I thought, I'm cheating it already, so that's good. But then I had a therapist to help me understand that it really was complex post-traumatic stress. And I was able to change the diagnosis. I'd done so much work, my diagnosis was changed. And that gave me then something to latch onto. And what I started to do was study the impact of post-traumatic stress within the military going back to the Napoleonic Wars. And then that gave me a thread, as you said, to pull and try to come to terms with what I was dealing with.
Right. Yeah, we want to make sure everybody knows you don't have to be sexually abused to find BrainTap useful.
Yeah. No,
things like that. And what we're saying is that we need to reframe those experiences. When I talk about reframing, it's like when you look at that, obviously that kind of filtered your whole reality.
It did.
So you have to go in and change those filters. What were some of the things you started doing that we're going to obviously incorporate those into the BrainTap program that we're putting together. But maybe you can tell the people watching what some of that feedback is.
Yeah, and I talk about it extensively and deal with it. I take people through my process and my journey, but it really is the culmination with what you've pulled together with the BrainTap. It's addressing self-talk. It's changing the vocabulary within. It's coming to an understanding that thoughts are things, that my mind is a fertile, active space that is either positive or negative based upon the input that I give it. I learned that as number one. The second thing is I came to understand my body as a system, that garbage in, garbage out, that little things like refined sugars, and for me it's red food coloring, I think it's number 5 or
yellow something.
That those alone will bring on massive anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation. So here I was, and I was every time it'd be, like you said, a strand I would pull, and so I just was pulling these strands. And how I got to it is I worked out, I mapped out the things that I wanted to change. Then I did a Venn diagram, and I came up with the 20% things that would have the 80% impact. And most everything outside of physical exercise, getting sleep, controlling my diet, outside of those things, the other 70% of that 20% was mental. Is changing the way that I thought, saw the world, and how that impacted my interaction with the world. Gave me the ability to be able to continue to grow beyond, not allow my past to define me, but refine me. Be able to pick myself up and go forward. And I think that decision was probably the biggest one I ever made.
And Mel, you were there for some of this journey, or when you joined in. Tell me a little bit about what your experience was and what you. Most people would really congratulate you for
sticking to that. I do.
At first, I just worked for John, but I saw him, struggling in some areas, and so eventually we were good enough friends for him to sort of tell me, okay, here's what I deal with on a daily basis. And so way back then, at that time when we were just friends, I started to read about the brain, and because I knew a lot of it was going to be a physiological thing, a change that happened, with the trauma that we would need to somehow address. And that's what's been brilliant for us about BrainTap was that we sort of came to the realization that we don't have to just try to manage John's sort of visceral, almost a physical response to some things, like if he hears a loud noise and it sort of sets him off and triggers him. we don't have to have that be the case for his whole life, that we can retrain his brain and we can, balance things out so that he doesn't have to be in fight or flight mode for the rest of his life. So what it's given us is this great hope. We were sort of, we'd come this far in our journey, and then BrainTap was going to take us the rest of the way.
We feel like we got as far as we could. I wasn't sleeping. I was sleeping better than I ever was, but I still wasn't sleeping. I still, till this morning, I have a fight with the sympathetic nervous system. I'm in fight and flight continually. So that's probably the next big challenge I have to overcome, is how do I not be whatever that is? I don't know what that is. I can't remember not being in fight and flight.
Right. In the system that I have with BrainTap, there's one of my books is called Discover the Language of the Mind. It's all the techniques I teach therapists.
Great.
And there's one where there's people now call it they have this identity syndrome where they're not they're faking. They feel like they're faking it, and then that implodes. And people find when they make a change, there's a point in time when you have to give up the old.
Yeah.
And bring on the new, and there's a point in time where there's not the certainty.
Yes.
So we talk about that, and we tell people, the old saying, you got to fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Right? But the problem is that a lot of people, that's where the neural pruning comes in. And when people think about change, it's not just about creating new behaviors. You've got to do some neural pruning. It's like going into the garden and taking and pulling out those weeds that are in there. And those weeds in the neuro landscape, those are programs that have been running for you unconsciously.
Yeah.
So you're not even aware of the program.
Absolutely.
So now the programs, you're aware of the program. Now the program you're aware to, now we need to start interrupting that pattern.
Yeah.
So what I tell people is, imagine you're, just as an easy example I can show you, if I go up to shake your hand, what do? And I pull that away. What happens internally for you?
It was like, why?
Right. There's a disconnect, right?
Yeah.
So, but if I shake your hand, see that connection?
Yeah.
That's when your old patterns run. You feel that comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you disrupt them,
that was really weird.
So you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So the other thing for those that aren't driving, if you're listening to this, but you can take your hands, do this, put your hands together like this, and notice the thumb that's on top. And so you just roll the other thumb on top. What does that feel like?
Weird.
Weird, right?
Yeah.
So shake your hands out. Put your hands back together. And did you put them back the old way or the new way?
The old way.
Old way.
Right. So so if you one thing I tell people is, if you really want to start learning about your physiology, do little things like every time you put your hands together, you notice you're doing it the same way, roll it over. Pretty soon this new way will become as comfortable as the old way.
That's good.
And but the physiology, that's just moving your thumb.
Yeah.
So imagine in your case, your whole physiology changes, because when you think about relationships or you think about these things, your whole physiology, we don't realize that we have a pattern, that our brain has patterned us. So, there are certain people that'll say, when you're around your parents, let's say, you act a certain way. When you're around the guys in the gym, you act another way. In the clubhouse, you're going to have different language patterns.
Yes, yeah.
In the gym. Yeah. So these are all states of consciousness, right? So these states of consciousness represent themselves in the physiology of the body. So when somebody says we have a mental health problem, we do, but it's a physiological problem. And you pointed it out, because foods are triggers.
Yeah.
Foods are drugs, really. I mean, when you think about one of the first things my mother did for us, my dad was an alcoholic. I didn't get the abuse like you did, but I had the abuse from an alcoholic father. Yeah. So, there's all sorts of different abuses out there.
Sure.
And the problem is that when you're young, your brain doesn't know how to compartmentalize, organize, even realize that they're doing the best they can with the information they have. They might not have really good information.
Yeah.
They might be thinking this is normal, or they might be thinking this is a hedonistic lifestyle, and this is just go for everything you can right now. It's the only thing we're going to get. And they don't have the consciousness to handle whatever's coming next. So when you're little, most people don't realize your subconscious doesn't really evolve unless you train it to evolve.
Okay.
That's where mindfulness meditation happens. So it's like you have this closet, and every once in a while you go in with a flashlight, and you look around and you say, anything you see with the flashlight, you say that's all that's there. But the reality is, you need to turn on the light, see the big room. It's not a closet anymore. It's a big giant room. So you have this infinite space in your mind to make changes. You have this program that's running in the background, we need to disable that program. That's called neuropruning.
Okay.
The problem is it takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, it does.
Right?
It's
So
a lot of work.
Yeah. And what happens is emotions drive behavior. So if you're in a low emotional state, anger, fear, resentment, you're going to crave foods that will exacerbate those problems. Like
that makes sense.
Wow,
That's why,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Right. So when you think about recovery, you changed your diet, right? So what would you encourage somebody out there right now that's maybe suffering from some of this? What would be one of the easiest things they can do? I mean, I have some ideas, but I'd rather hear from you. What would be an idea for them to start changing their diet? Because you don't want to just wholesale change everything, because if you change too much, then you get into that space where you don't know who you are, and then that's when you start making bad choices sometimes.
Yeah.
So we've got to build a little bit of a bridge before we go there.
Probably the lowest hanging fruit I find for people, even behaviorally, is getting up at the same time and going to bed at the same time. I found that the first thing I did. Diet-wise is I switched to a high protein, high fat, low carb diet. So my first meal was not anything sugar, like the Cocoa Puffs disappeared, any of that sort of stuff disappeared. And then I went for that because I found that the fats fed my brain, the fats satisfy me. It was actually it was lower calorie input than a high sugar or like pancakes and syrup or something like that. And that didn't spike me at all. It kept me very mellow. And I found that a very useful thing. And I'm not the sort of personality that just makes small changes. So when I changed, everything changed. We tried vegan for a while. Dude, it was the most miserable 6 months of my life. It just didn't
He
work.
was hungry.
I was hungry all the time.
He was angry.
Then we did some DNA stuff, and I found out, I was Australian Aboriginal. So then I started to look at what the diet was genetically, and that brought me more back to the higher proteins, natural fats.
Gotta have enough iguana too.
Yeah, enough. Exactly, enough kangaroo and goanna. I couldn't find much in Texas, mate. Yeah.
So we tell people, if those that follow me, number one is you cannot think a bad diet.
Yeah.
I mean, when you put that food into your body, there's a reason, like in AA, they say that the alcohol is more powerful than you. It's not that the alcohol is really more powerful than you, but when it goes into your body, it takes over your body.
Yeah.
And that's sugar.
Yeah.
I mean, when people think about alcohol, it's sugar. So when you think about sugar derailing the nervous system, sleep is super important, like you said. For those that know, sleep is when you incubate your superpowers. So if you don't get to bed at the right time,
wow,
it's great, isn't it?
It's awesome.
Yeah. So when you go to sleep at night, that's when your brain processes your day. And if you don't go to sleep before 10 o'clock, you don't make as much melatonin. If you don't go to bed by 11, your liver doesn't cleanse as well. So there's all these different things. We're tuned.
Very good.
So we're tuned to the light of the sun, and we're actually genetically programmed to wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
But a lot of people use alarm clocks.
Yeah.
And that alarm clock sends their nervous system into fight or flight, and they don't realize when you're vibrating at that fight or flight frequency, you're tuning into all the memories that are in that frequency.
Oh, wow. That's
so think of like when you're tuning a radio station. What station are you listening to? When a good friend of mine, Doug Grant, who we're doing a seminar with in September in Vegas, he has a saying that I told him I was going to steal. So I'm going to
here we go.
Give credit at least one time.
Yes, basically he says frequency is it's what you frequently see. So think of your frequency. What do you frequently see in the world? Because you can't see anything outside yourself you don't have inside yourself. You can't give something you don't have.
That's deep.
So when you think about, so we know that everything is vibrating. We already said that. So you have this negative emotional state. It's going to keep you tuned into those negative emotional patterns.
Yep.
So we need to break those patterns.
Yep.
And one way to break them, of course, is we have BrainTap.
Yep.
There's also breaking it up in the meals, drinking plenty of water.
Yep.
Like you said, fats are what our body needs.
Mm-hmm.
Our whole American diet is designed to keep us imprisoned.
Yeah.
I mean, it basically keeps us trapped in a carbohydrate loading mode. And I mean, that's fine if we're out in the fields working all day long and we're, and we're young and we can burn off the sugar. But the problem is, as we get older, that creates a toxic load to the body. And that sleep time you're talking about, that's the only time our brain detoxes.
Wow, that's interesting.
So when you think about your recovery, when you're going through, you probably found when you started to uncover this, you became really tired.
All the time,
Yes.
all the time. Yeah,
Right, because these neurological circuits are holding all the energy.
yeah.
And so they're going to fight for survival. Just like anything else. They want to, the neurons that fire together wire together, right? So when we unwire, it takes a massive amount of energy. That's why when we work with some of the vets, they might do I don't do this myself, we bring in an expert that would do like a psilocybin maybe, or they'll do ME5, or they'll maybe even go on an ayahuasca trip or something like that. They'll do some kind of journey because we need to blast. Some people need dynamite, but we need it in a healthy way. And the nice thing about a psilocybin and these ones, if you had talked to me 15 years ago, I'd have told you don't do it. It's But now that I know the research and I've been working with people, what we find is that there's a short-term window to create neuroplasticity. So when you talk about, like, even reading your book is going to open people up to neuroplastic changes. Like when we hear a story from somebody and it makes sense to us, and we have those aha moments. Those aha moments are literally the moment in time when the energy in that neural network gets activated. And we feel it because our hair stands up. Right? Yeah. We get the energy rush through our body. So we're energy beings. And unfortunately, when we do things that are counterintuitive to our body's health, like when you're a kid, you're not designed to really have sex with people, right? Or when you're 19 years old, we're not really designed to just go out and kill people we don't even know, in the military, just because they have a different flag or they have a different skin color, people or they have a different way of thinking about religion, but these are all programs that we're given. Now the problem is, and let's just talk about PTSD on a bigger scale so we can get your feedback on that. Sure. When I work with a military person, I'm going to use that as an example. Let's say they're special forces. Every day they get up, they know it could be live or die, right? Because they decided to do that. They love the thrill of it. They're an adrenaline junkie. They love pushing to the limits. They love maybe being on the edge. At any moment they could die or they could be the savior, whatever's going on. And they do that for 20 years. And then they say, you know what? Thank you. Go home. We don't need you anymore. Yeah. They've never trained their brain to turn that off. They're conditioned to have chaos, and they work great under chaos. Yes. And in the chaos mode, their brain is functioning at a high level, and they're in sympathetic drive, like we saw yours, because you got to be on alert. Yep. You never know when the next, and this also happens too, by the way, if a mother of an autistic child, or if you're dealing with a sick loved one, and you don't know what's going to happen, your brain starts to pattern after PTSD programs. Wow. So when you think about what happened during 2020, everybody went through it. Because the uncertainty factor was there. And we're being told by a power greater than us that's not spiritual. What we're going to do. It's okay if you listen to a power greater than you that's spiritual. That's telling you what to do. So when the brain gets interrupted, what did you find? I mean, we're going to talk about BrainTap in a moment, but what did you find other than BrainTap helped you to get through those moments? Because when your energy's low, that's what we're trying to stop, right? The people that are committing suicide, they're taking it's a problem they have that they haven't found a solution for. They don't see a long-term solution, so they feel like I'm only this is the way it's going to be for the rest of my natural born life. I'm going to end this now. What do we have to change? What do you think from your perspective and from writing the book and dealing? I mean, you've dealt with thousands of people like this. What do you think is one of the things people can do to flip that switch?
I had to be very proactive in how I ordered my life. I had to get out of my head because my head was not a good place. It wasn't a pleasant place. So I would do things. I took up flying because it was completely self-absorbed. I was just totally absorbed in my head. And it was the freest and the best I felt was when I was flying and the activity of studying. I found the gym the same. I started bodybuilding competitively because it was completely absorbing. Your diet, your sleep, your exercise. And I was very regimented, so I knew what I was doing pretty much every 30 to 45 minutes. So I wasn't having to think about it. Even if I was tired, I had enough to get up and make those decisions to do it. So I changed over my diet, that helped. I changed my exercise, that increased my body, increased testosterone, which is very important because with sexual abuse, it's very similar to adrenal fatigue. You don't naturally produce testosterone, you naturally produce estrogen, so everything's out of balance. So there's a range of things that I had to do there. And then I very deliberately committed to having affirming relationships around me. I remember there was one, and I talk about this and deal with it, there was one place where I was stuck and I needed to move forward. And I made the decision that me living was important enough to cut off relationships that weren't going to be positive and affirming. That I would rather walk on my own than walk with people that were going to pull me down and speak to my past. And so that having that loving and affirming environment, which Melissa's been essential for, taking responsibility for my program and my day, understanding that if I needed to get regulated emotionally and I could do that physically, that would help, and then that would help me interact with those around me. So those were very small changes. They were all micro changes. And I think waking up and just saying, man, I'm not going to be a dickhead today is just impossible because you're wired, as you said, to that.
And it starts from a negative. You know, you're like, I don't want to do those bad things. Instead of focusing on what the good things are that you want to do. We hear a lot, too, from people that say, oh, well, I don't have a male, so obviously I can't get better from PTSD. Well, that's not, it's not your spouse's responsibility. But in order to have that affirmative environment that we talk about that's so important, John made a commitment to be vulnerable. And I think that is what led him to be able to build those affirmative relationships is to be honest with somebody and say, here's where my struggle is, and here's where I think I need help. And so I think it's also a commitment to be vulnerable, to build those relationships.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. One of my favorite sayings to my clients was always, you get what you rehearse in life, not what you intend. So a lot of people have great intentions, but we all know the road to hell is paved with them. Yeah. So, people have, and the problem is our physiology. Like you said, get up in the morning, it's just, basically our brain is trying to protect us.
Yeah.
So it's not working against you out there. It doesn't know any better.
Yeah.
Right.
So we need new information.
Yeah.
And just like a garden, we need to break up the soil, put a little fertilizer in there. Sometimes you got to deal with the crap, and then and then you got to plant new seeds, right? And that's what we're doing when we create the series based on this book. Which if you've ever read the book, Deal With It, I recommend you do, especially if you've had any trauma. He's going to put it in perspective for you, and it's always good to know that there's a way out.
Yeah.
And we always say that the only way out is in.
Yeah.
You got to go inside and you got to fix whatever's going on in there, because it's not about, you're no longer 4 years old. You're no longer 8 years old.
Yeah.
You're no longer 14 years old. Yeah. But our subconscious doesn't know that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are running around dealing with these things and just sugarcoating them. Or maybe they're using drugs to offset them. Yeah. And they could be even pharmaceutical drugs. It doesn't matter what drugs you're using. As long as you're using something to chemically coat this, it's like putting, chocolate on a turd. Eventually,
the turtle come through.
Yes. Eventually, it's going to start stinking, right? When they talk about stinking thinking. So when we deal with it, there's a really good book called Emotions Never Die, right? So we have to, these emotions, we need to think about it like an emotional charge, and we can discharge that. We do that through something called NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming, which I was fortunate enough to train with Bandler and Grinder when they were still in the 80s. And when I was doing therapy, I didn't realize there's a structure to everything. Like, you figured it out on a conscious level, and then we met, and you're now using BrainTap. But before that, you had found a way to do it.
Yeah.
And really, it's like brute force.
Yes,
right?
it is. Absolutely brute force.
So you can brute force it.
Yeah.
We were pushing the boulder up the hill by ourselves. Yes. And you go an inch at a time,
You've probably heard that it takes 21 days to make a change. You've heard that. There's been no there's never been a study that says that. Nobody can find that from me. Yeah. What they did find was in Harvard and in Stanford, they said it takes 21 days if you use visualization and relaxation techniques.
Oh, really?
If you don't, they said it takes 18 months. of doing something correctly. So when everybody grabbed onto that 21 days, and they didn't say, oh, using something like BrainTap. I mean, obviously you can do it on your own if you're good at it. You have somebody who's a mentor who can teach you to use your mind. But what we're going to do is, in our series that we're working together, we set out 20 sessions. And so I tell people it's a 20-week program, really, where you start working on yourself. And the first step is to uncover the reality of who you are.
Yeah, that's good.
When you realize you're not the victim.
Yes.
That the victim, obviously that happened, it's painful, and you don't deny it. Yeah. But that's not you.
Yeah.
You're different.
Yeah.
And we have to reclaim that, kind of like the inner child work that people have done. You know, that child is still being abused if you don't bring them up and say, hey, what's going on? Because the subconscious, there's no time there.
Yeah, that's good.
Right.
And so we have to do that neural pruning job that we need to do.
Yeah.
And number one, realize that you are a child of the universe. You know, that there is joy, there is love, there is all the positive emotions are there. Yeah. It's just like a radio station, like I said, you've got to get into but you've got to be that before you get it. Yeah. It's a lot of people say, I'll do that when I get, like a lot of people say, I'll be philanthropic when I get money.
Yes.
That never happens.
Yeah, it's true.
You've got to, you do it before, and then the money keeps coming.
Yeah,
yes,
that's right.
We did just so everyone understands, we did a study. They can see it on YouTube with a doctor, not a doctor. He's a yogi over in India. His name is Daji, and he runs the whole health wellness meditation group. There's millions of them.
Wow. The
biggest group I've ever spoken in front of, 75,000 people.
Wow.
And what we did was Dr. Vivek Sharma, who runs, he was running Ames Bhopal at the time, one of the Ames Institutes, and he's a head of physiology. And what we want to do is find out when you're praying for somebody. So what they did, this technique is really simple. You meditate, you visualize energy coming through you, through your heart, and now we know there's 40,000 neutrino cells in our heart. They can think, have emotion, have response. And so this heart meditation, they would visualize this energy going out to another person. And so what Daji asked us to do, because Dr. Vic was one of their meditation people, so he asked me to come over with our equipment and measure their brains, their bodies. And what we found out blew their minds, because the person who was getting the healing, like they would have 4 people sitting around, sending healing to this person, certainly they got some energy. But the people that got the most energy, the ones projecting the energy.
Wow.
Yeah. All their energy increased.
Wow.
So the old saying, the more you give away, the more you get.
Yes.
So in part of this healing is look for something of purpose. Think of you, whatever happened to you, and this is what I tell people, whatever happened to you, however bad, and for me, it wasn't as bad as what happened to you, but I have a chapter in my book called How I Was Blessed to Be the Son of an Alcoholic.
Yes.
Because what good does it do me to tell people, my dad was an alcoholic, I should be an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I think that again is every superhero that you read about had to go through a dark night of the soul. They had to go through something. In your case, you signed up for it. I don't know on what level, but some way you signed up so you could be here now telling people that there is a solution for their problems. And if you're hearing this or you know somebody out there that's suffering, then this is the time to get on board to, find out. There's been no better time. In the past, nobody dealt with this. Yeah. I mean, our military, for instance, back in Vietnam, they would go to war one time, they'd come home, they'd have what they call shell shock. Yeah. And they'd have to deal with it in silence. Yeah. Now,
good luck.
Right. Our military now, some people are going back 4 and 5 times. Their nervous system has no idea what reality is. Right. Yeah. So the first step is to unwire that programming. The next step is to realize that you are imbued with skills. Yep. And they're simple skills. Everybody can sleep. Yep. The problem is they're not doing the right things to sleep. You might have to go around turning off lights. You might have to take a warm bath.
Not watch your phone.
Yes. Yeah, not watch your phone. Turn off the news. Yeah. Number one thing for trauma, I tell people, is stop watching the news.
And social media nowadays.
Yeah, it's just get off of it.
Right.
It's just not good for you.
Yeah, just like you did when you're pruning those negative friends. Yeah. If you have friends on social media that are just naysayers and negative people,
dump them, man.
Just unfriend them. They're not worth your time, because we find there's 10% of the people out there that are just nuts. They're going to tell you all about their crazy life, and they're doing it to get validation. And and then there's 10% that are going to brag up a life they don't even have. And the other is, if I can go watch my grandkids play sports or something, I'm out of town on social media, then I like that. But the problem is that people are thinking that's life. Life is in the real world. This is the 3D world that we live in.
Right.
We have, as we're sitting here, most people don't realize this, but when you're under stress and anxiety, they did a study during COVID. And like I said, the heart has this energy. We know that we all project 810 to 850 nanometer light. That's actually infrared light.
Wow.
And for those that have followed light therapy, you know that's the healing lights that you get in centers like ours here.
Oh, wow.
So our bodies, every one of us is a healing generator.
Wow.
But what they did is they did the study, they said, if you look at your life as a threat rather than a challenge. So they took the people and they're able to measure everyone that you have, just like in science in freshman year, you probably had the sun and you had a little black thing and you put it in a jar and it could turn the wheel because of the sun's light. Those are photons hitting it.
Yeah.
You have photons coming off of you. I have photons coming off me. That's why you can see me.
Yeah.
But we're sharing information on a level we don't even know about. So the people you're around, when they say that you're the sum total of the 5 people you hang around most, it's because you're sharing information on a quantum level. There's quantum information going on.
That's cool.
So, but what they showed in this study, which blew my mind, was that the people that looked at life as a threat actually produced 200 times less light.
Wow.
And what we know about that light, so you understand the trauma, what trauma does to the body. Imagine I want to send a signal from here in New Bern, North Carolina to New York City. I need energy to put it out, to get it there. Something's going to have to help me put that energy out. But if I'm producing 200 times less energy, I'm not going to be able to send that signal to New York. So if I'm thinking a thought and I want my body to respond, it's not going to respond on the same level. It's actually going to, every 40 seconds, every DNA pair in your body, everyone listening as well, every DNA pair is actually changing based on everything.
Wow.
Not on one thing, on everything. So when you think about your thoughts, you think about your sleep patterns, you think about the food you consume, you think about the people you hang out with, the people, books you read, the TV shows you watch, everything is going into building who you are. So what I tell people, the next step is we need to figure out where your resources are.
Yes.
And focus on those.
Yeah, good. That's good.
So once you start doing that, and there's a whole series of those that we're going to go through, and the whole thing is about teaching people how to think again, not what to think.
Very good. Very, very good.
So when you think about BrainTap and what it does, so tell me a little bit about your experience with BrainTap and how it's working, so we can kind of round out the podcast and tell people a little bit about that.
So I knew what I wanted to change. I would even go so far as to say I knew why I wanted to change. I didn't have the how to change it. And, I'd sit and meditate and I would fall asleep or just get incredibly bored. And I did the 1 minute meditation thing. I went on 10% happier and I tried all that. And I got to a point and I was grateful for those things, but they only took me so far. And what BrainTap did was say, made it very simple and incredibly impactful. It allowed me to be able to go, okay, I put this on, I do this 2 to 3 times a day, one if it's not, whatever, 1, 2, 3 times a day, best is 3 as you always say, and I do it, but then when I sat down, I was ready for this. So in line with what you're saying, my whole body starts to get attuned and I'm away. My whole body's away, and my whole body's away. And the impact has been phenomenal. My ability to be able to concentrate, my ability to be able to sleep, a reduction in my stress, improving cognitive function. And so all those things that I've spent 15 years on my own trying to do, this has been like the thing that's pulled it all together for me.
Great. And Mel, you've been there too, and you're using BrainTap as well.
I am.
A lot of people don't realize the support system gets stressed out too, because you're the one, kind of out there as a satellite, doing your thing. So tell us a little bit about how you're using BrainTap to help.
First of all, I was not very self-aware about the stress, and just before we got the BrainTap, my naturopathic friend, she's a naturopathic doctor, she was like, you actually are carrying quite a lot of stress and you are dealing with some anxiety. I'm like, no, I'm fine, you know. And so what BrainTap has helped me do, I had gotten to the point where I wasn't sleeping very well, and I've never in my life had a problem with sleep. And so it's got me right back on my good sleeping patterns. And John and I both noticed, and it was really strange to us, but we're both more flexible.
Touch your toes flexible, not just cognitively flexible.
But like flexible, like in the gym flexible. And I was like, do you think that's a BrainTap that's causing that? But I think my whole body is more relaxed, you know.
Well, you're an energy being, so the more energy you get in, and a lot of people don't realize when we have the lights in the eyes and the ears, that light is actually going directly into the brain because the blood flow, there's more blood flow and capillaries from the eyes to the brain than any other place in the body.
Really?
So when you think about blood flow into the brain, the light energy is absorbed by the hemoglobin, goes in and finds a cell that's about to die. When that cell absorbs that photic energy, it actually starts the Krebs cycle. And statistically they show 32 times more ATP production. So you have more energy.
Yeah.
So anything from movement to flexibility, all those things have to do with energy. When somebody says you go to, let's say, I love chiropractors, but you do a chiropractic adjustment. That adjustment didn't do it. What happened was you aligned the spine so the energy from the brain could flow to the body.
The energy flow
gets
corrected.
The energy flow was corrected.
Yeah.
And so once that energy flow is corrected, the brain moves. The bones don't do anything until the brain says ligaments, tendons, and muscles move those. So the bones don't do anything, the muscles don't do anything, the ligaments don't do anything. It all starts with the brain. So everything starts with brain function. So when we think about and as we age, one of the things that most people don't understand too with trauma, there's a correlation between heavy trauma and Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah.
Because the brain starts to shut down.
Right.
If it doesn't want to deal with something, the brain is really good about shutting down, pretending it doesn't know, and just making it out of your awareness.
Interesting.
Doesn't mean it's not doing anything there. It just means it's kind of like I tell people, it's like having a car in your driveway. You get up every morning and you go, why is my car empty? I filled it up before I went to bed, but it was running all night because those programs kept running.
Wow.
So we need to get rid of those programs so you free up that energy to recharge and restore your body.
That's very good.
And so the other thing is that you can't have anything it's not inside you. So first thing we need to do is create a frequency of peace and harmony, and our bodies are designed to do that. I still remember the day when I met the researchers at Ames Bhopal, and I took somebody who had never meditated and showed them they could have the same profile as a guru's brain within 15 minutes. And the doctor said, you're cheating. And I said, what do you mean I'm cheating? He goes, well, these gurus spend 30 years to do this, and you're teaching them to do it in 15 minutes. There's got to be something missing there. And I said, well, have you ever meditated to a candle? And of course we meditate to candles all the time. I said, do you know every fire flickers at 10 hertz frequency? 10 hertz happens to be, for those listening that don't know the brain waves, 10 hertz is the alpha brainwave. That's the one that triggers when you're in love and you create acetylcholine. So there's 64 different neurotransmitters. So they're all related to the brainwave state you're in. So that's why when you sleep, you go through the sleep cycle, you build up your neurotransmitter bank account. You can think better in the morning. You have more energy and things because the brain is telling the gut to make these neurotransmitters. So when you think about that trigger, and I said, do you ever wonder why the gurus go to the mountains to meditate? And he goes, oh, you had to get away from people. I said, no, they're cheating. He says, what do you mean? Well, the mountains themselves, actually, it's an isochronic tone generator. So that's another way that the body responds to things. So the planet itself is a frequency generator. If we're in the mountains, it's 7.8 hertz. If we're near the water, it's 10 hertz.
Wow.
If you're near a volcano, it's 88 or something hertz. So when you think about these different frequencies of the planet, if you and I were to fly to Earth and look at the planet itself as a whole, it would have frequencies from 0.5 to 100. These are called Earth frequencies. Those are what's going on in the eyes. So the body, remember, everything is vibrating. And if you go online to YouTube and just put in metronomes, there's one that I really love. There's 300 metronomes. They start them all at different times. Within 3 minutes, all those metronomes are synchronized.
Wow.
That happens to our brain. When we start, we're sending in the signals through the ears, the eyes, the senses. We're overloading the senses with a certain frequency response. The body then begins to team and vibrate to that, and then it goes through the whole body. That's why some people will say, I didn't feel my body, but my mind was awake. That's when you're in the perfect state. That's where people, there's something called the default mode network, which is that monkey mind that people talk about, and why they don't get results with meditation, because we got to put that aside for a moment. We got to get into a higher level of consciousness, which is not fear, not anxiety, not depression. All negative emotions also have one thing in common: they have no breathing. Right? There's no breath. If you think about anger, fear, resentment, people aren't breathing.
Hold your breath.
So one of the other things that we teach people through the BrainTap process is breathing. You'll hear me say all the time, take a deep breath in, hold at the count of 3, let it out with a psychological sigh. There's even breath exercises. So when you think about, when I met you, I said, man, we got to get you part of our mission to better 1 billion brains, because there's a lot of people out there. So when you think about your community that you've been working with all these years, what do you think the biggest impact is for them to look into BrainTap to see if it's something that they might want to use?
My recommendation is that they need to get hold of BrainTap, at least one per household, and I say that purely from an experiential point of view, is that it has radically improved my ability to do life, to think business-wise, our relationship. And so I did have a very traumatic background. Mel didn't have the same sort of trauma involved, but how it's impacted my wife and her view of herself and our relationship has been incredible. I
would say is this the thing that we've done a lot of things over our years together. It's the one thing that I can look at and say that has had more impact than anything else that we've tried.
Yeah. And we're very grateful for the 15 years that brought us to here. Because I think 15 years ago, if this was around, I wouldn't have believed it.
I would have looked at it sideways and been like, whatever.
Yeah, flash your lights, whatever, man.
So everybody's on their own journey.
But we've done the brain research. We did the diet research. We've done the meditation research.
Even the breathing.
We did all that research, and it brings us to the point where it's like, hang on, this ties it all together. So my hope is that if someone is watching and someone is at the front end or the beginning or even hopeless in their journey, that they would stop and understand that you've got a tool here. And what I like is it's tangible. For me, that was very important because everything else is a little bit ethereal and tree huggerish. What I like about this is I can put it on, and if I just trust the process, like if you're flying a plane with instruments, you're trusting the process, you're trusting the data, you're trusting what it says. And that's been the other incredible thing, mate, is being able to see that data in some of the diagnostics tools.
Yes, we need to also give a plug for NeuroCheck because that thing is amazing.
It's incredible. It really is. It's worth it finding a clinic that does that, or meeting the team at an event, being able to see how your brain changes in just 10 minutes.
So they check you before and then check you after, and you can see the impact that BrainTap has had on your energy level, your level of stress, all of those, even your metabolism, ladies, if you want to lose weight, just saying.
Yeah, so, and I think part of the challenge that people, and this is another thing I really appreciate about Patrick, is that so much of this space is filled with, and I know it's a derogatory term, but tree hugging and candle blowing people. It's like, they all just say like, rub this sage on your forehead and the world will get better. It doesn't get better. But what I've liked about this, the science that sits behind this, the learning and the wisdom that sits behind this has allowed us to take it, trust it, and use it and benefit from it. And it's been 8 weeks, and these have been the most profound 8 weeks in our journey so far.
It's awesome.
We're very, very grateful.
And remember, if you're not already a BrainTap user, you can always go to BrainTap.com, get the 14-day free trial, see if it's something you want to do. Even without the headset, like our sleep study we did in Australia, we did the coal miners in Western Australia, because somebody was saying they wonder about circadian rhythm. I said, I'm going to go somewhere they don't have any circadian rhythm. Yeah. I mean, they're working in the dark, they leave in the dark, and Dr. Keown, who helped us do that, we showed that even with just the app, it took 6 weeks and they had 70% sleep improvement.
Wow.
So if you're not sleeping, like you said, I think that is number one. You got to get the sleeping right. You got to get the diet right. Drink plenty of water. and basically it's something it's going to take. I wish we could just wave a magic wand past people and
but
change.
you got to do the work, man.
Yeah, it's a daily thing. When somebody says, I remember my dad when he was still alive, and clients would say, "How long do I have to do this?" And he said, "Until you want to." Because this is something, if you don't maintenance your own memories,
it's good.
right now, when you turn on the TV or you drive down the road, the billboards, the radio, all these things, and even your family, friends, brothers, sisters, preachers, and teachers, they're all trying to convince you to be something.
Yes.
And if you don't know who you are, what the old saying is, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
Fall for it.
So we need to figure out first who you are, and you're not all of these negative things that have happened.
That's very good, mate.
You are, those were things that happened to you, but you're not, when they say you can't be a behavior in psychology, most people don't get that. They think that they're behaviors. You're not. You're whatever the essence is behind the behaviors. And there is joy that can be had in your life. There is.
Yes,
good.
Good.
And when you're of service, just think in terms, even if you don't know what you're going to do when you grow up, because you've been trying to figure it out, it will reveal itself as you heal yourself.
Good.
It's very good.
So the thing is that you're here for a reason. Every person is here for a reason. There's no accidents. God didn't make any junk.
Yeah, that's good.
Just like they found out there's no junk DNA, right?
Yeah.
The junk DNA is now, they know every 40 seconds changes.
Yeah, that's good.
It's not junk. They just couldn't read it.
Yeah.
It's just like there's a group in California right now that's using, they call it the stratosphere, and it uses altitude to change your physiology. And they use BrainTap in it too. But when they're doing it, what they found was as people were expanding their capacity to get more oxygen into their body because of what they were doing for healing, they actually developed new lung tissue.
Wow.
So it's never been discovered before. In 2015, they discovered that we have the glial lymphomic system in the body. So we don't even know physiologically who we are.
Yeah.
All the science we think we have, nobody really knows the end result of who we are. We're still evolving.
Can I say how hopeful that makes me feel that my DNA is changing like every however many seconds? Because like I had a negative thought like 5 minutes ago, but now I can change it right now.
Yeah.
Right now I can change, and I can change again now.
It's the biggest thing is that people need to understand that life isn't about a final result.
Yeah.
Failure isn't final. It's when you give up trying that's final. There's always a choice. We can always do something, and we're putting together this program. We're calling it Journey to Peace.
Yeah.
When it comes out, we're going to probably have you on another podcast to
Absolutely.
tell people about it and tell people about it. But this time together, I think the BrainTap Nation needs to know about the book. Deal with it. We'll put the link to buy it in the show notes.
We'll give a code to people so you get 20% off. You'll type in BrainTap at the checkout and I'll do it. And deal with it. Someone asked me what I think of deal with it. For me, it's duct tape for the soul. It's not just someone who's been abused, but if it's someone who needs to overcome something. And that's what you need to understand with BrainTap. It's just not for trauma sufferers. It's for someone who wants to improve the quality of their cognitive and physiological being.
So what have I forgot to ask you about, or what do you want to share that we haven't talked about, or what do you want to reinforce to the BrainTap Nation about recovery?
There's hope. There is hope. I know there's probably people there today, and you've used BrainTap, but it still hasn't clicked for you yet. Is just don't give up. Like, giving up is the worst thing you can possibly do. My old boxing coach taught me, you just need to chuck your chin and throw punches. When it all comes down to it, it's the decision to tuck your chin, stay present in the ring, cover up if you've got to, and just throw punches. And sometimes it's as simple as good air in, bad air out. Don't give up. You woke up this morning, breathe, cover up if you've got to, and just throw. Just throw. Because tomorrow will be a new day, and you'll have a new chance, and it comes with hope and possibility. And if you just keep pulling together enough of those bad days, believe it or not, you'll get a good day. It's coming. From personal experience, it's coming.
So we're talking to Dr. John King, who wrote the book Deal With It, and we're going to put those in Living Well with PTSD. And it doesn't have to be as traumatic as his. Everyone has gone through something. it teaches you how to recover. And Mel, I want to give you a chance to just share any final thoughts with BrainTap Nation before something you want to reinforce.
I would just echo what John said, is that there's hope. Like, if it can happen for John, it can happen for anyone. You just get up, like he said, and, start to string those days together, and you string good day after good day after good day, and there's hope. I also would just really reiterate to anyone who has tried BrainTap already or is thinking about trying it, that you are worth setting aside that time every day. That you are, 20 minutes 3 times a day is like life-changing. And so you are worth setting aside an hour a day to change your energy, to change everything about your body and how it functions. I think it's a really structured way to do that.
That's great.
So there you have it. And we're going to encourage you to share and like this. If you're not the one suffering from PTSD, I'm sure you know someone, because they're out there suffering in silence. And you can share this with them, tell them the link to the book. You could be helping that person finally get out of that dark hole that they're in and suffering from, and hopefully prevent somebody from throwing their life away in a way that, because we need everyone right now fully charged, fully ready, because there's a lot of evil out there. We need to make sure that we're ready for the good that's part of life, and to bring that to pass as reality, not all this doom and gloom that's out there. So we've been talking here with Mel and John King. We're having a conversation about recovery. We're putting out a whole program called Journey to Peace, and that's going to be coming out on BrainTap very soon, probably within the next month or two, and we'll make sure BrainTap Nation knows when that happens. So again, thanks for following us on the Brain Fitness Podcast. We look forward to hearing about your results and sharing this with your family and friends. Remember, we're on a mission to better 1 billion brains. If you're listening, it's your brain now. So figure out who you want to help better their brain and share this recording with them so that we can start changing the world one brain at a time. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on our mission to better 1 billion brains. Follow at Dr. Patrick Porter on social media for updates, and remember to practice brain fitness every day.